Hello there, and welcome to Fireside Reading. My name's Gildart Jackson, and every day at 5 Pacific, I sit in front of the fire and I read a chapter or two of a wonderful old book to anyone who might like to hear the book and join me. I started this almost a year ago. I was thinking, I think we started around April the 1st last year, right after the lockdown started. And we've been doing it most every day, and we've read many wonderful old books together, and we're continuing because I'm enjoying it, and I gather some people out there are enjoying it too. So I'm very grateful for you for joining me, and I'm very happy that people enjoy this. We are currently in the middle of Moby Dick, actually nearing the end of Moby Dick, a book that I have really enjoyed reading to you all. And just to preface where we're going to the Arsacides, which I had to look up. And it was another name for the Solomon Islands, which are those islands, a sort of line of islands just to the northeast of Australia in the Pacific Ocean, just to the east of Papua New Guinea. So miles away. And at this time, in the 1850s, incredibly unvisited. Welcome to a fireside reading of Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Chapter 102. A bower in the Arsacides. Hitherto, in descriptively treating of the sperm whale, I have chiefly dwelt upon the marvels of his outer aspect, or separately and in detail upon some few interior structural features. But to a large and thorough sweeping comprehension of him, it behooves me now to unbutton him still further, and untagging the points of his hose, unbuckling his garters, and casting loose the hooks and the eyes of the joints of his innermost bones, set him before you in his ultimatum. That is to say, in his unconditional skeleton. But how now, Ishmael, how is it that you, a mere oarsman in the fishery, pretend to know aught about the subterranean parts of the whale? Did erudite Stubb, mounted upon your capstan, deliver lectures on the anatomy of the cetacea, and by help of the windlass hold up a specimen rib for exhibition? Explain thyself, Ishmael. Can you land a full-grown whale on your deck for examination, as a cook dishes a roast pig? Surely not. A veritable witness have you hitherto been, Ishmael, but have a care how you seize the privilege of Jonah alone, the privilege of discoursing upon the joists and beams, the rafters, ridgepole, sleepers, and underpinnings making up the framework of Leviathan, and belike of the tallow vats, dairy rooms, butteries, and cheeseries in his bowels. I confess that since Jonah, few whalemen have penetrated very far beneath the skin of the adult whale. Nevertheless, I have been blessed with an opportunity to dissect him in miniature. In a ship I belonged to, a small cub sperm whale was once bodily hoisted to the deck for his poke or bag, to make sheaths for the barbs of the harpoons and for the heads of the lances. Think you I let that chance go without using my boat hatchet and jackknife and breaking the seal and reading all the contents of that young cub? And as for my exact knowledge of the bones of the Leviathan in their gigantic, full-grown development, for that rare knowledge I am indebted to my late royal friend Tranquo, king of Tranque, one of the Arsacides. For being at Tranque years ago, when attached to the trading ship Day of Algiers, I was invited to spend part of the Arsacidean holidays with the lord of Tranque at his retired palm villa at Pupella, a seaside glen not very far distant from what our sailors called Bamboo Town, his capital. Among many other fine qualities, my royal friend Tranquo, being gifted with a devout love for all matters of barbaric virtue, had brought together in Pupella whatever rare things the more ingenious of his people could invent, chiefly carved woods of wonderful devices, chiseled shells, inlaid spears, costly paddles, aromatic canoes, and all these distributed among whatever natural wonders the wonder-freighted, tribute-rendering waves had cast upon his shores. Chief among these latter was a great sperm whale, which, after an unusually long-raging gale, had been found dead and stranded, with his head against a coconut tree, whose plumage, like tufted droopings, seemed his verdant jet. When the vast body had at last been stripped of its fathom-deep enfoldings, and the bones become dust-dry in the sun, then the skeleton was carefully transported up the Pupella Glen, where a grand temple of lordly palms now sheltered it. The ribs were hung with trophies, the vertebrae were carved with Arsacidean annals, in strange hieroglyphics. In the skull, the priests kept up an unextinguished aromatic flame, so that the mystic head again sent forth its vapory spout, while suspended from a bough, the terrific lower jaw vibrated over all the devotees, like the hair-hung sword that so affrighted Damocles. It was a wondrous sight. The wood was green as mosses of the icy glen. The trees stood high and haughty, feeling their living sap. The industrious earth beneath was as a weaver's loom with a gorgeous carpet on it, whereof the ground vine tendrils formed the warp and woof, and the living flowers the figures. All the trees, with all their laden branches, all the shrubs and ferns and grasses, the message-carrying air, all these unceasingly were active. Through the lacings of the leaves, the great sun seemed a flying shuttle, weaving the unwearied verdure. Oh, busy weaver, unseen weaver, pause, one word. Whither flows the fabric? What palace may it deck? Wherefore all these ceaseless toilings? Speak, weaver, stay thy hand, but one single word with thee. Nay, the shuttle flies, the figures float from forth the loom, the freshet rushing carpet forever slides away. The weaver god, he weaves, and by that weaving is he deafened, that he hears no mortal voice. And by that humming we too, who look on the loom, are deafened. And only when we escape it shall we hear the 1,000 voices that speak through it. For even so, it is in all material factories. the spoken words that are inaudible among the flying spindles. Those same words are plainly heard without the walls, bursting from the opened casements. Thereby have villainies been detected? Ah, mortal, then be heedful, for so in all this din of the great world's loom, thy subtlest thinkings may be overheard afar. Now, amid the green, life-restless loom of that our circadian wood, the great white worshipped skeleton lay lounging, a gigantic idler, yet as the ever-woven verdant warp and woof intermixed and hummed around him, the mighty idler seemed the cunning weaver, himself all woven over with the vines, every month assuming greener, fresher verdure, but himself a skeleton, life folded death, death trellised life. The grim god wived with youthful life and begat him curly-headed glories. Now, when with royal tranquil I visited this wondrous whale, and saw the skull an altar, and the artificial smoke ascending from where the real jet had issued, I marveled that the king should regard a chapel as an object of virtue. He laughed, but more I marveled that the priests should swear that smoky jet of his was genuine. To and fro I paced before this skeleton, brushed the vines aside, broke through the ribs, and with a ball of our circadan twine wandered, eddied long amid its many windings, shaded colonnades and arbors. But soon my line was out, and following it back, I emerged from the opening where I entered. I saw no living thing within. Naught was there but bones. Cutting me a green measuring rod, I once more dived within the skeleton. From their arrow slit in the skull, the priests perceived me taking the altitude of the final rib. "How now?" they shouted. "Dost thou measure this our god? That's for us." "Aye, priests. Well, how long do you make him then?" But hereupon a fierce contest rose among them concerning feet and inches. They cracked each other's sconces with their yardsticks. The great skull echoed, and seizing that lucky chance, I quickly concluded my own ad measurements. These ad measurements I now propose to set before you. But first, be it recorded that in this matter I am not free to utter any fancied measurement I please, because there are skeleton authorities you can refer to test my accuracy. There is a Leviathanic Museum, they tell me, in Hull, England, one of the whaling ports of that country, where they have some fine specimens of finbacks and other whales. Likewise, I've heard that in the Museum of Manchester in New Hampshire, they have what the proprietors call the only perfect specimen of a Greenland or river whale in the United States. Moreover, at a place in Yorkshire, England, Burton Constable by name, a certain Sir Clifford Constable has in his possession the skeleton of a sperm whale, but of moderate size, by no means of the full-grown magnitude of my friend King Tranquo's. In both cases, the stranded whales to which these two skeletons belonged were originally claimed by their proprietors upon similar grounds, King Tranquo seizing his because he wanted it, and Sir Clifford because he was lord of the seigneuries of those parts. Sir Clifford's wail has been articulated throughout, so that, like a great chest of drawers, you can open and shut him in all his bony cavities, spread out his ribs like a gigantic fan, and swing all day upon his lower jaw. Locks are to be put upon some of his trap-doors and shutters, and a footman will show round future visitors with a bunch of keys at his side. Sir Clifford thinks of charging twopence for a peep at the whispering gallery in the spinal column, threepence to hear the echo in the hollow of his cerebellum, and sixpence for the unrivalled view from his forehead. The skeleton dimensions I shall now proceed to set down are copied verbatim from my right arm, where I had them tattooed. As in my wild wanderings at that period, there was no other secure way of preserving such valuable statistics. But as I was crowded for space and wished the other parts of my body to remain a blank page for a poem I was then composing, at least what untattooed parts might remain, I did not trouble myself with the odd inches, nor indeed should inches at all enter into a congenial measurement of the whale. Chapter 103, Measurement of the Whale's Skeleton. In the first place, I wish to lay before you a particular plain statement touching the living bulk of this Leviathan, whose skeleton we are briefly to exhibit. Such a statement may prove useful here. According to a careful calculation I've made, and which I partly base upon Captain Scoresby's estimate of 70 tons for the largest sized Greenland whale of 60 feet in length, according to my careful calculation, I say a sperm whale of the largest magnitude, between 85 and 90 feet in length, and something less than 40 feet in its fullest circumference, such a whale will weigh at least 90 tons. So that, reckoning 13 men to a ton, he would considerably outweigh the combined population of a whole village of 1,100 inhabitants. Think you not, then, that brains like yoked cattle should be put to this Leviathan to make him at all budge to any landsman's imagination? Having already in various ways put before you his skull, spout hole, jaw, teeth, tail, forehead, fins, and divers other parts, I shall now simply point out what is most interesting in the general bulk of his unobstructed bones. But as the colossal skull embraces so very large a proportion of the entire extent of the skeleton, as it is by far the most complicated part, and as nothing is to be repeated concerning it in this chapter, you must not fail to carry it in your mind or under your arm as we proceed. Otherwise you will not gain a complete notion of the general structure we are about to view. In length, the sperm whale's skeleton at Tranquo measured 72 feet, so that when fully invested and extended in line, he must have been 90 feet long. For in the whale, the skeleton loses about 1/5 in length compared with the living body. Of this 72 feet, his skull and jaw comprised some 20 feet, leaving some 50 feet of plain backbone. Attached to this backbone, for something less than a third of its length, was the mighty circular basket of ribs, which once enclosed his vitals. To me, this vast ivory-ribbed chest with the long, unrelieved spine extending far away from it in a straight line, not a little resembled the hull of a great ship new laid upon the stocks, when only some 20 of her naked bow ribs are inserted, and the keel is otherwise, for the time, but a long, disconnected timber. The ribs were 10 on a side. The first, to begin from the neck, was nearly 6 feet long. The second, third, and fourth were each successively longer, till you came to the climax of the fifth, or one of the middle ribs, which measured 8 feet and some inches. From that part, the remaining ribs diminished till the 10th and last one spanned 5 feet and some inches. In general thickness, they all bore a seemly correspondence to their length. The middle ribs were the most arched. In some of the Arsacides, they are used for beams, whereupon to lay footpath bridges over small streams. In considering these ribs, I could not but be struck anew with the circumstance, so variously repeated in this book, that the skeleton of the whale is by no means the mold of his invested form. The largest of the trunque ribs, one of the middle ones, occupied that part of the fish which in life is greatest in depth. Now, the greatest depth of the invested body of this particular whale must have been at least 16 feet, whereas the corresponding rib measured but little more than 8 feet, so that this rib only conveyed half of the true notion of the living magnitude of that part. Besides, for some way, where I now saw but a naked spine, all that had been once wrapped round with tons of added bulk in flesh, muscle, blood, and bowels. Still more for the ample fins. I here saw but a few disordered joints, and in place of the weighty and majestic but boneless flukes, an utter blank. How vain and foolish, then, thought I, for timid, untravelled man, to try to comprehend aright this wondrous whale by merely poring over his dead, attenuated skeleton stretched in this peaceful wood. No, only in the heart of quickest perils, only when with the eddying of his angry flukes, only on the profound, unbounded sea, can the fully invested whale be truly and livingly found out. But the spine, for that, the best way we can consider it is with a crane to pile its bones high up on end. No speedy enterprise, but now it's done, it looks much like Pompey's pillar. There are 40 and odd vertebrae in all, which in the skeleton are not locked together. They mostly lie like the great knobbed blocks on a Gothic spire, forming solid courses of heavy masonry. The largest, a middle one, is in width something less than 3 feet, and in depth more than 4. The smallest, where the spine tapers away into the tail, is only 2 inches in width, and looks something like a white billiard ball. I was told that there were still smaller ones, but they had been lost by some little cannibal urchins, the priest's children, who had stolen them to play marbles with. Thus we see how that the spine of even the hugest of living things tapers off at last into simple child's play. Thanks for joining me. I hope to see you all tomorrow, same time and place, 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading. And if you miss a chapter or you want to go to any of the books that we've read, please find them at the YouTube channel, Fireside Reading. Until I see you all again, please be very well. Goodbye.